All right, friends, the show is on. Welcome to the What's Right show. Sam Mirejovsky here, behind the What's Right microphone. Greetings, friends. My email is sam@what'srightshow.com. On Twitter, on X, as it is now called, at What's Right Sam. So I have to, let me step back a little bit from the news out of New York City. We talked about this yesterday, and I think there's a broader issue for consideration here that I wanted to bring up with you today. So if you have not heard, a democratic socialist, self-described democratic socialist, won the Democratic primary in the city of New York for the mayorship. So this is kind of a big political earthquake. We talked about it yesterday in some part. Zohran Momdani is his name. Bested Andrew Cuomo, a famous Democrat in the state of New York, someone I think who is also not very popular, but nonetheless, Momdani got 43.5% of the vote to Andrew Cuomo's 36.4%. This is a huge. Yes, it's just the Democratic Party nomination. I get that. But there are 3.3 million registered Democrats in the city of New York. There are 1.1 million independents, and there are 558,000 registered Republicans. The reason for Mr. Momdani being at the top of the charts now, likelihood to win the mayor's race in New York come the fall, is because Democrats basically outnumber everybody more than 2-1. So the winner of the Democratic primary, in other words, typically becomes the presumed victor of the general election. Now, a lot of things could happen here. I want to go through this because it's not just about New York. It's about the state of the country. And there is a very alarming thing for me, the son of immigrants who fled communism to come to the West, to eventually settle in America and pursue their American dream, growing up in a world, first, that was still dominated by the horrors of communism behind the Eastern Bloc, and then coming of age in a world where communism ended in Europe, it ended in Russia, and we could see plain as day those countries improving and developing in freedom and in economic opportunity. I have, over the past, well, since 1989, so for the years since the freedom obtained for Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, I've been going year after year. I've very rarely skipped a year of visiting there. And I can tell you the difference that freedom and capitalism make for people is immense. So it just boggles the mind, right? That there is this growing number of Americans in this country who are, for whatever reason, bewitched by the idea of socialism that has failed, by the way, everywhere it's been tried. Now, here's what I have to say. There's a couple of thoughts here that are important, sort of foundational to all of this. The entire conversation of the past 8 years has been dominated by pro-Trump, anti-Trump. Are you for Trump? Are you against Trump? Do you like Trump? Do you not like Trump? And the Democratic Party has gone all in on being, well, of course, being anti-Trump, but more than that, becoming almost a cult of vitriolic hatred for the president and candidate, now president again. Now, what's missing from this conversation is any real discussion about issues. Look, for example, at Iran. We'll get to this a little bit later in the program. But you had people at one point because Trump opposed bombing and intervention in the war, call for bombing and intervention in Iran by the U.S. And the minute that Trump did it, there was an abrupt turnaround. And the very same people on the very same networks a week later literally claiming that this was the biggest mistake ever, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what does this have to do with democratic socialism? Well, it's a great question. Because here's what we've got. Since we haven't, for the better part of 8 years, 9 years, had a real discussion about anything other than Orange Man bad, there are real issues out there for which solutions have not been offered. And I have right now, I want to say this to every single person who is older than me. Let's say you are, for example, a boomer. You're a baby boomer and you hate Trump. Everything you see is based on how bad Trump is, what Trump, has or hasn't done, how America is worse off under Trump. And unbeknownst to you, you're probably a Democrat, by the way, if you think that, but it's okay. Unbeknownst to you, a creeping majority of your party, or certainly plurality of your party, is beginning to identify with an ideology that has set its sights on everything that you have. Let me put this another way. Across America, there are people in their 60s, 70s, 80s who get on Facebook every day and rant about Trump, who are obsessed with Trump, who talk nothing about how terrible Trump is, who vote Democrat. They don't care who they vote for, as long as it's a Democrat opposed to Trump. That's their level of political involvement, discourse, and overall just, of belief. And meanwhile, they don't realize that within their Democratic Party that they have been a part of their entire lives, have given money to, etc., have voted for all the candidates, that there is a significant number of people that look at these older Americans and resent the fact that they have their home, own it free and clear, that they bought their home for $120,000, that they talk like this openly, that these people have it made in the shade, have pensions, are able to afford groceries, have been able to attain the American dream. The reality is that a significant number of young people have not been able to, or do not believe that they ever will be able to, crack into success. And by the way, I think there's a number of factors for this. And top of it, of course, is the indoctrination that we see at universities and people getting useless degrees and being steered into a life, of burdened by ridiculous college debt for the purposes of just getting a degree that ends up being meaningless. And we could go on what the causes are, but they resent you, is my point. They resent me, but they resent some of you out there who have been focused, I would say obsessed, with hatred and vitriol for Trump. Meanwhile, there's a whole group of people inside your own party that's coming after you with pitchforks. When I hear this Momdani guy talk, when I hear AOC talk, and I'm not talking about when AOC goes on CNN or MSNBC, but when she holds some of her smaller rallies, I mean, these are the same exact things that up-and-coming politicians at the end of World War II said in countries like Czechoslovakia to adoring fans, got people riled up, and ultimately resulted in ushering an age dominated by murderous regimes across the Eastern Bloc. It'll happen pretty quick. And, I realize, for a lot of Americans, and I was talking about this with a friend today at lunch, a lot of Americans, this is a bridge too far. We cannot conceive a situation where a revolution of words turns into a revolution of action. But folks, every single revolution started this way. This was the beginnings of Marx. This is the beginnings of the Ayatollah Khomeini. This is the beginnings of Mao, okay? Of Fidel Castro. They didn't start as military movements from day one. These were thoughts. These were freely expressed beliefs, but they persuaded people. They won people over. They pulled the wool over their eyes. And of course, everything that was promised to the adoring fan base of voters and supporters never materialized. Far from it. Every country that dabbled in this type of foolishness has suffered fatal consequences. So I want to unpackage this a little bit today because this is bigger than New York City. This can spread. And you may listen to me and go, well, Sam, you're being an alarmist. Okay, fine. Don't you want to hear from somebody whose family experienced this? I can tell you right now that those folks that came from Soviet countries, communist countries from around the world and are here in America and get what's up are terrified by what they are seeing happen. And the Democratic Party is slowly but surely being taken over by radicals. And that is the story of the day. And anybody talking about Trump this and Trump that and Orange Man bad is just lost in the weeds, is absolutely about to get blindsided this next decade as this democratic socialist train hits them dead on. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam & Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam & Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
Hi, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky here, News Talk 840 KXNT. Welcome to the What's Right show, your place for common sense conservatism, Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. here on the station. Of course, you can always get the podcast. So if you're used to listening on the radio but occasionally miss the program, you're wondering, gee, I got to hear what Sam said today, but I couldn't listen to the whole show. Go on Apple Podcasts, go on Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, the Odyssey app as well, and you can find What's Right show. I prefer right now, I like Spotify. That's where you can see the video. I have the Sam cam here in the studio, so you can actually see that it is me and not one of those new Elon Musk automaton robots. You ever thought about that, Robbie? At some point, it's just going to be an Optimus sitting here behind the microphone, giving the whole show. Well, then I could go have a long lunch. All right. Sam at what'srightshow.com is my email, at What's Right Sam on X. Socialism coming soon to a city near you, as it appears to be landing in New York City. And people are scratching their heads about this as to why. And one of the interesting things, as I was talking about this with Robbie a little bit before the show, is just figuring out where all this is coming from. Because the statistics on who voted for this guy, and if you're just waking up to this news, there's this guy named the amazing Zoltan. And Zohran, Momdani. He's born in East Africa. His dad, I believe, came from a part of India. He is a Muslim. He is a radical. He's a self-described socialist. And he is, I believe, not someone to be underestimated. So I saw this by Christopher Rufo. You know who he is. Very smart guy. Wrote this a little bit earlier today. The thing about Zohran Momdani is that he's not an Islamist, but a regime leftist who understands that the symbols of the exotic other, meaning, you've got a little dollop of some diversity in you, which he certainly does as a Muslim, as an immigrant, as a non-white guy who also happens to be a radical socialist. That's what he calls the exotic other, are an extremely valuable, this is Christopher Rufo, are an extremely valuable currency within the world of the radical left. Rufo then adds that Zohran Momdani was able to very skillfully combine the outward appearance of the third world oppressed, which we, by the way, know the left loves that, with the inward politics of the average white Democrat Socialist of America leftist. He calls it a very powerful formula. And Rufo adds that, like AOC, Mr. Momdani has the charisma to make it stick. My commentary on this, my addition to it is, do not underestimate this guy. For years on my program, I have been telling people, do not underestimate AOC. And almost every time I say that on air, I get an angry email. It's just like clockwork. Sam, stop praising Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I think to myself, well, I'm not here praising her, guy. You're missing the point. I'm just saying, let's take her seriously, okay? I tend to not want to get caught with my, strategically speaking, caught with my pants down when it comes to the enemy, to the opposition. I don't. I always want to be in a position where I am prepared for this. My point is here. I'm concerned. And here's when you look at the vote on because this was a Democratic primary, so this is Democrats voting. But just to remind you that this is not insignificant. If you look at New York, 3.3 million registered Democrats, 1.1 million independents, and not even 600,000 Republicans. So sort of what happens in the primary can foretell the future of the general election. So who voted for this guy? Okay. Under $50,000 in income. Do you think under $50,000 a year in income voted for the socialist? Yes or no? Quick question. Just temperature check. The answer is no. Under 50,000 income voted for Cuomo at plus 19. Almost 20% more people under $50,000 a year voted for Cuomo. What about 50 to 100,000? Well, that's Momdami, plus 6. Over 100,000. Momdani, plus 13. What about population density? Lower density voted for Cuomo, medium density Momdami by 12, higher density Momdani by 3. Now, I'm already starting to come up with some ideas. By the way, what do you think is the reason for the lower income people actually going for Cuomo? One thought on this is that the lower income folks already get an incredible amount of goodies from the government. They already have free this and that. They already are subsidized. They already have rent control. They already get free bus passes and all this stuff. And by the way, where do they live? Do they live on the Upper East Side? No. They live in the parts of the city, in the parts of New York that are crime-ridden, okay? Lots and lots of crime. They're at the tip of the spear, in fact, of criminal activity. And I think those are the people that really don't need more socialism, but at the same time don't want to see the police defunded, right? These are the people that want the promise of common sense Democrats saying, yeah, we need the police. And at the same time, don't need the socialism. The reason that so many over $100,000 a year people are voting for a Democratic socialist, that's what's alarming. And I'll explain exactly why when we return. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Greetings, friends, and welcome to the What's Right show, brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. Sam Mirejovsky here, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian. Let me tell you a quick story here, fast. In Wisconsin, a 34-year-old guy who was high on magic mushrooms. That's how they're being, I guess, not magic mushrooms. Anyway, well, yeah, magic mushrooms, per the police, crashed and killed a construction worker. Now, two different stories have the victim here, dying. One has him surviving the accident. Regardless, the name of the driver, the 34-year-old driver who caused this crash, is the thing that got my attention. The driver's name is Patches Magic Beans. That's his honest to goodness name, Robbie. Don't laugh at me. It says right here, this is a New York Post article by Chris Neal, published about 20 minutes ago. Driver named Patches Magic Beans, high on mushrooms, in a crash. Kills construction worker. Okay. This reminds me, Robbie, just real fast, bear with me here. Last night, I am coming home from the office. I'm on if you're here in Las Vegas, you're probably familiar with the Spaghetti Bowl. If you're not from Las Vegas, that is an interchange that is called the Spaghetti Bowl because whoever designed it might have actually been on magic mushrooms. And so I'm on it, and I'm following a car. It's just a big sweeping on-ramp. I'm following a car. It's a single lane on-ramp. And the car in front of me, for no good reason, almost hits the concrete side. And if they had, they would have spun around and probably hit me. And it just made me think what I was saying, and I say this a lot on this program. There's some crazy driving here in Vegas. There's crazy driving everywhere, including in Michigan. There are people named Magic Beans driving cars. If you get in an accident, get some help. Get advice on what to do. Talk to an attorney. And the law firm to trust for this is Sam & Ash Injury Law. 702-820-1234. Offices here in Nevada and California. 702-820-1234. Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right. Now, by the way, Robbie, if the Democratic socialist running for mayor in New York City, his name was Magic Beans, I'd believe it. It might as well be. Right before the break, I mentioned the statistic that I think a lot of people find pretty shocking, which is that by median income, the greatest support that this socialist Democrat, Islamist, Jew-hating, Hamas-supporting radical got was from people making over $100,000 a year. Why? Let me tell you another story. I just read somewhere today that the estimate for joblessness, the unemployment rate of the 2025 outgoing graduating Harvard class, undergraduate class, is 25%. So I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. When we Republicans get a little libertarian bee in our bonnet and we go, he's not going to meddle in institutions. We're going to let schools do what they do. We're hands-off, laissez-faire. It's what we do. That's what conservatives do. And in the process, over several years, a few decades, in fact, those institutions become hotbeds of fervent leftist radicalism. Two things occur by definition. Number one, the students that graduate don't know, I want to swear, I'm not Trump, so I can't get away with it. They don't know SHI, you know what? They don't know anything. They haven't learned anything of importance. They've learned that there are 500 genders and that you can turn a squirrel into a moose. As long as the squirrel says, I'm a moose, everything's good. It's a moose. They learn about socialism. They do. They are, and I know this. I started my college career at UCI, University of California, Irvine, also affectionately referred to as the University of Chinese Immigrants. And, I would be there. I would sit there in class and I would listen to, honest to goodness, professors making $200,000 a year back then telling me about the glories of socialism and communism, etc. You should see my little hand shoot up in class. Oh, I argued with them, but to no avail. Most of my classmates sat there, ingested all of it, and probably most of them might still believe it for all I know. But let's get back to 2025. It's gotten much worse since then. You go to a school like Harvard, what are you promised? You're promised that you go to Harvard, you're going to graduate, you're going to have a degree, and people are going to be falling over themselves to pay you a lot of money. So you get yourself into debt, you go to school, you learn in school a bunch of nothing. You come out of school, you still don't know anything politically, you don't know how the world works. Worst of all, you have a degree that is kind of worthless. Ergo, you're unemployed. And you're voting age. And you see a bunch of boomers, and by the way, just because you're liberal and you hate Trump doesn't mean that you're going to be spared from these radicalized masses when they come after you with pitchforks. But I digress. They see you, successful boomer. They see me, Sam Mirejovsky, successful, 45, driving a nice car, living a good life. They don't know, for example, this is an important point. They can't even imagine when you bought your house, then in the early 80s, your mortgage was 15%, 17%. They don't want to know that at 25, 24, 22 even, I was working, 15 hours a day. They don't want to hear that. That's not interesting to them. And by the way, a lot of us don't talk about it enough. We don't talk enough about how hard success is, that America guarantees the opportunity, but not the result. We don't preach the gospel of self-reliance enough in this country, right? So we're indoctrinating people to believe the opposite, that they deserve handouts and that socialism is glorious. And on the other hand, we're sending them out in the world with enormous debt right out of the gate, right? Student loan debt, number one. Number two, we're sending them out in the world with a degree that really has not conferred upon them any special skills. And so it's not helping them actually attain the things that matter, which is self-reliance, a career, a job, right? Goals being met, etc. The people under 50,000 are poor immigrants that are just happy to be in America, in New York City. They didn't vote for the socialists. They come from countries where socialists exist, or they themselves already, as I mentioned before the break, might be getting enough benefits that they, are not particularly persuaded by this guy. But if somebody's making $120,000 a year in New York, you're poor. I did the math on this, Robbie. I'm going to sound so pretentious saying this, but here goes. You really probably can't have that great of a life in New York unless you're making over $500,000 a year. I think that's true. Now, why is that? Let's take 500K. I'm going to use let's use an even number, right? Let's use 600, and I'll explain in a moment, because there's 12 months. So first off, $300,000 of 600 already goes up in taxes, right? So you're left with $300,000 after taxes, plus or minus. Now you divide that by 12. Okay, what do you get? That's $25,000 a month. What's rent in New York? If you've got, let's say you've got 2 kids. Brutal, right? Can they go to public school? No. You want to try private school? Tuition in private school, 50, 60K a year. I mean, you start working your way down. I mean, you're going out to dinner in New York. That's going to be $300 for you and your wife to go out to dinner. It's unbelievable. And the reason, by the way, everything is so expensive, and this is what we as conservatives, as Republicans, don't talk enough about. The reason all this stuff is so expensive is because of the crazy, insane policies the Democrats put in place. When these cities were run as capitalist, cutthroat capitalist city, every immigrant starting out could get a house. Maybe not that great, but they got a place. They found an apartment. There was affordable housing. But then came rent control, then came zoning, then came all these rules that were supposedly supposed to help everything. Did they? No. They caused shortages. Every single thing that has ever been proposed by a socialist in the history of socialism creates misery. Because when the government, when a ruler, when the authorities come in and declare, we're going to make this affordable, we're going to lower the price, and do so by executive fiat through legislation or decree, you're messing with supply and demand. And all of a sudden, there isn't enough. There aren't enough apartments. There isn't enough food on the stores of shelves. You don't have toilet paper this month. Sorry, we're out. Would there be toilet paper on the shelves if it's a free market and companies are free to compete to produce the best toilet paper for the least amount of money so that the masses buy it? Of course. But the minute you have Zohran, Momdami come along and say, we're going to do store-run, city-run stores. Oh, we're not going to do a profit motive, whatever. Watch it. Watch what's going to happen. You'll have empty store shelves in the government-run stores, and then the few stores that are for-profit that somehow can hang on are going to have toilet paper that costs twice the money that it did before. Because they can charge that now because there's so little of it available. And people don't think about this further than the moment. And the reason they don't think about this is they never attended a single class in high school or in college, whether they went to a community college or they went to Harvard, that ever challenged conventional thinking on communism, socialism, and command economies. They never had a professor explain to them supply and demand. They're busy learning about climate change, about social injustice, about gender equality, and other completely useless, pointless topics. And then they leave school and they're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and completely, as Trump put it, effed. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT, back in a moment. From 2018, Isaac Stanley Becker, Why White Liberals Are Retarded. No, that's my version of the headline. White liberals dumb themselves down when they speak to people. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Let me explain to you number one reason why currently the Democratic Socialists of America don't mean what they say. On one hand, they claim that they are fighting for affordability and for better living, working, earning conditions for working class Americans. Yes or no? Yes. On the other hand, what else do they say? They want an open border. They don't want immigration enforcement. They want sanctuary cities. Those two positions cannot coexist without canceling themselves out. You can't have a country overrun by not free, but cheap labor and a volume of labor, and at the same time demand that wages go up. Well, you can only do it then by creating a minimum wage, and that minimum wage prices beginning people out of jobs. And companies still go around it, and because there's no ICE enforcement, this is what the Democratic Socialists want. They don't want any enforcement of any immigration rules. So employers just go out and hire people, for under the minimum wage, hire illegals, and that's that. It's doomed to fail, all of it, from the go. Well, saying this is crazy. Anyway, by the way, here are some of his policies. I mentioned this yesterday. I think it's important. Freeze the rent for nearly 1 million New Yorkers living in rent-stabilized apartments, free city bus service, universal child care, use of social workers in place of police, and my personal favorite, city subsidized. He doesn't say city subsidized it. He actually said in one of his ads that the city would own and operate these grocery stores. And this is what the, Mayor Johnson in Chicago wanted to do as well. And he's basically almost getting run out of town. I mean, his approval rating is at 14%. In 2020, Zohran Momdani introduced a bill supporting legislation that would reduce incarceration, ending cash bail, decriminalize sex work, legalize marijuana, permit safe injection sites, restrict solitary confinement, enact elder parole, re-enfranchise incarcerated New Yorkers. Yeah, give them votes in prison. Why not? Repeal all mandatory minimum sentences, reduce maximum sentences with retroactive effect, repeal bump up statutes, repeal sentencing enhancements. Oh my gosh. Robbie, if only this had ever been tried somewhere in a city like, I don't know, San Francisco. They did all of this in San Francisco. All of it. Did it work? I mean, I don't even, that's what I want to ask. Is San Francisco a success? And for whom? So I think the only people that made any kind of money in San Francisco were the people bilking the city for homeless services. Like if you're a consultant in a democratic socialist run city like San Francisco, New York, I would argue to some extent, although not yet, certainly LA, Chicago. Look at all the money in LA that went to homelessness instead of going to the firefighters, right? We knew this. January of this year, the big fires in LA, and all of a sudden everybody's looking at the budget going, oh my God, what's this line item? This $100 billion plus going last year to the homeless, and only, 14 or 15, 18, whatever it was, 2 million to the, no, it was not billions. It was 100 million, over 100 million going to homelessness. And it was, 18 million going to the fire department. And people were looking at this going, oh, and I'm telling you, there are people getting fat off of it, right? It's on a small scale of what USAID is. It doesn't matter. Okay, so the government, the people in the government will make a ton of money. In communist countries, the elites live very well. If you're part of the Politburo, if you're the president, if you're the president's family, if you're a member of the Politburo, you're on the controlling council of the country. If you're a top-ranking communist, you're living pretty well. In communist Czechoslovakia, they had their own hospitals. They had their own stores. They had their own recreational sites, their own resorts where they were able to vacation with their families. Those resorts did not allow ordinary workers, working classes of the country to go and visit. The elites lived behind walls. They lived in palaces and villas that were stolen from members of the bourgeois class who had these properties for generations, for example, in their families, or who had bought them with their own money. They were appropriated, confiscated by the government, handed back out to Communist Party members. Classic redistribution, but not redistribution in a way that takes from the rich and helps the poor, as they're suggesting, but literally the kind that takes from the rich and gives to the new elite, the new richest of the rich, the socialist kings. Meanwhile, Democrats were all out there, no kings, no Trump, no everything. You're missing the point, people, completely missing it. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Rarely wrong, always right. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Greetings, friends. By the way, I'd like to wish a warm What's Right show happy birthday to Clarence Thomas. Yes, indeed, one of our favorite Supreme Court justices, 77 today. Well, anyway, that's great. It's wonderful. I'm going to get into a minute here the NATO summit in the Netherlands. Trump is already on his way back. There are some notable things that happened. I want to touch on those. And Trump, of course, was in rare form. So we'll cover that in a minute. I just wanted to play a bit of The View today. A few hours ago, the ladies of The View had some deep, deep thoughts about the current political discourse in the country and the state of the resistance against Trump. Now, if you're just tuning in, we've got this Democratic Socialist guy in New York who is, obviously he's won the Democratic primary there in the mayor's race. It's relevant because these socialists are taking over the Democratic Party. Some of you were around when JFK was the Democratic Party, and that no longer is true. The Democratic Party today is far more about Zohran Momdami, AOC, or, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, about the lady from Somalia who's possibly had relations with her brother, and Rashida Tlaib. Well, Ilhan Omar. Okay, if I have to be specific. And I don't know that she's had relations with her brother, but apparently the two of them were married in order to get him legally admitted into the U.S. So just whole thing stinks to high heaven, and she herself is a bit dodgy about denying it. So at any rate, Sonny Hostin of The View says that the Democratic Socialists of America, might be the good thing to do here. You can't just be part of the resistance without having ideas. Wow. How do people tune in and listen to this?
I've been saying, people are talking about a resistance, and I think that's a very inactive position. I think you need to be an opposition party at this point in this country. And so I think Democrats are finding their way with these younger voices. We saw it in New York for the new mayor who calls himself a Democratic socialist. He's very progressive. Wow. And he ran on issues that I think Republicans were owning before. He ran on cost of living issues. He zeroed in on essentials such as housing in New York, transportation, free buses in New York, childcare, groceries. Those are things that people are really caring about. Also, in the House, we've got the youngest person, I think, am I right?
Maxwell.
Garcia.
Oh, as the chairman of Oversight.
As the chairman of the Oversight Committee. So that also shows that that we're seeing, I think, this sort of new generation of leaders that are unafraid, and they're on the offense.
Robert Garcia, is she talking about the chairman of the Oversight Committee? Well, he wouldn't be the chairman. He would be the ranking member. Okay. This is, by the way, isn't this the position that Jasmine Crockett, the ghetto fabulous congresswoman from South Texas, wanted to be in that position and lost out to Robert Garcia? And Jasmine's 44. She's my age. I mean, you know, Robert Garcia's 47. She's the younger one. But take that aside. This is what I'm getting at. The paradigm is, or has been at least, resistance, resistance, resistance. Fight the orange man, fight Trump. And in all of this, there's this suddenly rising movement of quote unquote new ideas to run on, but they're just retreads of things that have failed, and not just failed a little bit, not just failed a lot, but failed spectacularly. Communism, socialism, when put in force, is responsible for tens of millions of deaths in the 20th century alone. People starved. People were murdered. Misery ensued. And I would argue that some of the greatest movements of people around the world followed these events. Enormously disruptive in a way not previously seen in the history of the world. So Sarah Haynes chips in. Again, this is on The View, that it's not about the age. She saves Sonny Hostin on that point, but it's about issues of quality of life. Quality of life, because it was so great under the magic wonders of socialist utopia.
It might be less about the age and more about the issues they're speaking of, because right now, the cost of living in the U.S. has risen by nearly 24% since early 2020. 24% in 5 years. And only 40% of Americans earn enough to afford a minimal quality of life. Almost half of this country can't even have the minimal amount.
Oh, so we voted for Democrat, got Joe Biden because Orange Man was bad. Cost of living went up because he dropped in a bunch of free money on the economy. Socialism, right? Socialism, free money. It drove up the cost of goods, and now the solution to it is more socialism. My gosh, these people are geniuses. Why didn't I think of this? Wow. Unbelievable. And how are we going to pay for this? Robbie, that's always the head scratcher. How are we going to pay for this? My goodness. Oh, we don't have enough money in the budget. You see this, by the way, LA is going broke. Job cuts at city government are on the table. LA is broke as broke could be. And without Kamala Harris or Joe Biden in office, nobody's there to send them free money. So it's a problem. Anyway, Sarah Haynes on The View today went on to say that this new mayor of New York, who's going to bring more of the stuff that's been going on in San Francisco and LA, is brilliant, and he's got a way to pay for it. Just wait till you hear this brilliant idea.
He's going to do something that is so brilliant. He's going to tax the billionaires. He actually said he wants to raise the corporate tax. He's going to do something that is so brilliant. He's going to tax the billionaires. He actually said he wants to raise the corporate tax.
The Democratic primary one.
He said, I'm going to...
He can't tax them federally. He can do city tax, but they'll move out of New York.
If you raise the corporate tax rate in New York, you're going to kill a lot of businesses that are
Yeah, but you know what? The bottom line is billionaires need to stop making tax write-offs and make the country their contribution. And they need to pay their damn taxes. Yes, but I'm saying that he said the way he's going to fund his freeze on rents in New York City is by taxing wealthy corporations and a flat tax for the highest 1%
What about owners?
You know, you can move across the river from New York City to New Jersey and get away from the tax. You can move to Florida and get away from the tax. You can move to Ohio. You can move outside of the city limits and get away from the tax. There's only so much of a premium that somebody will pay to be in a city. And when you then take away, as this guy proposes, by flooding the city full of dirty illegal immigrants who are mostly criminals, right? Because now you're also going to defund the police, kick ICE out, sanctuary city, I mean, why would somebody even want to live in New York if they have anything on them worth stealing? They're just going to leave. The companies will leave. We saw this happen under Bill de Blasio. Bill de Blasio was such an idiotic mayor in New York that he literally gave to Florida the tax base that is making DeSantis's wildest dreams come true. These are, right, Florida doesn't even have an income tax, but they've got property taxes, and these people have driven up property values to such an extent that Florida is laughing all the way to the bank off these taxes. And it's just property taxes. We're not even talking about that. They have that in New York too. More than 50% of your income, if you are making six figures, 250,000, something like that more a year, 50% of your income's up in smoke and taxes. And her idea, the brilliant idea of somebody that is paid to give her opinions on national television is, we're going to tax the billionaires. Wow. God, that's never been tried, Robbie. Yeah, they really got, these people are smart. So bad. The exchange yesterday on CNN Newsnight with Abby Phillips is good too. Joy Reid talked to a criminal defense attorney about this back and forth. I'll play that when we come back. Crime is a big issue too. You can't go easy on crime. Remember when California did away with 3 strikes? Crime went through the roof. It was a little oppressive. Even I had some problems. You know, somebody does 3 little felonies, goes away for life. Guess what? Now I feel completely differently. Bring it back, right? You let the criminals get away with stuff pretty soon, your whole state is gone. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam & Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right.
The Sam & Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
Hi, welcome back. The What's Right show is on, brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. sam@whatsrightshow.com is my email. So here's Joy Reid last night on CNN Newsnight with Abby Phillips. And Joy Reid, is talking. There's an attorney on, Arthur Aidala, and he's a criminal defense attorney. And he basically says that this Momdani guy in New York, it's what the Democrats want, right? They want to recreate 1970s crime-ridden city conditions. They don't really care. It's all defund the police. That's part of the political movement, and consequences be damned. This is a great exchange. So listen, here's this attorney speaking, I think, a bit of common sense.
There's no one happier after Momdani and his family than Eric Adams tonight, because everyone over 50 years old who remembers Times Square in the 1970s and the 1980s when you couldn't walk through, it was all pornography and crack and muggings and rapes and robberies. Everyone who remembers that is going to vote for Eric Adams. The New York Times, who didn't do an endorsement, did say, please don't vote for Momdani, as did the Daily News, as did the New York Post. So anybody who knows how bad New York can get all came out against Momdani, because a 33-year-old with zero experience running anything except a little office with 5 employees should not be running the city of New York.
Donald Trump is president of the United States. His experience was being on The Apprentice.
Always comes back to Donald Trump. See, these people are wired to be triggered no matter what the conversation. It's about Donald Trump. And I guess my point is, just very simply, when the Democratic Socialists actually take over, how long will it take them to come after Joy Reid and all the privilege that she enjoys in her very well-paid, luxurious life? You know? Trust me, it'll happen. Here's how the clip continues.
He's head of the Pentagon who's experienced being a weekend anchor on Fox. Are you kidding me? He's got Dr. Oz is in his administration. Dr. Oz,
but you're leaving out something. He's a 33-year-old socialist who's never run a popsicle stand.
He's literally in city government right now. Sorry, after Donald Trump, I'm sorry, after Donald Trump and his Pinky and the Brain administration, no one ever gets to talk about qualifications.
Socialism will not save the
bottom line is what I.
But Trump didn't have, come on, are you kidding me? Trump's a 70-year-old plus man who ran a business, who built buildings, was a billionaire. I mean, we compare it to this guy. Socialism will not save the capitalist capital of the world, said one of the guests there in the background. Where's the evidence, cries Joy Reid? Where the evidence that Momdani would bring the city back to its seedy past.
What is your evidence that Momdani would return New York City to the 1970s hellhole Times Square? What is your evidence?
It's very simple. So he wants to raise taxes on people who make the most money. What eventually is going to happen is you're going to lose that tax base. Once you lose that tax base, our bonds will get degraded. Now the city budget will not be substantial enough to subsidize not only the cops but the fire department, the sanitation department. Once you start losing Wall Street and people who pay $11,000, $12,000 a month to live on the Upper East Side, you're done.
Let me ask
and you go back to the 70s when Gerald Ford said to New York, drop dead.
Okay, but hold on, Arthur.
This is it. Common sense. Sometimes we lawyers are able to articulate things in plain speaking terms. All right. Excellent. Folks, I got to tell you, this is a story of our times. Now, it's bigger than just New York, because what the Democratic Party wants to do is take this all across the world, all across the country. And, Joe Scarborough, for example, had Hakeem Jeffries, who wants to be Speaker of the House, and flat out asked him, what do you think? What do you think about this Momdani guy? And Jeffries basically says, well, we think this guy's great. He goes, from the standpoint of House Democrats, we think that we have an affordability crisis in the U.S. We think we need to focus on driving the high cost of living down in the country. He basically endorsed it. And you have even Chuck Schumer, who himself is I guess he's Jewish. This guy's a crazy Islamist who wants to globalize the intifada. And you've got Chuck Schumer falling over himself to praise this guy. Like, the Democrats aren't going to fix this. And to those of you out there who are maybe reasonable Democrats and more middle of the road and maybe agree with me at least half the time, you got to realize, trust me when I tell you this guy not only going to take over the country, if people like him take over the country, you're in danger. These are the kind of people ideologically that will look at you and say, oh, you're 70 years old. Your kids are grown. Your home is paid off. We have people that can't afford housing. We're going to take your house from you. You're thinking, but Sam, they can't do that. The law says they can't do it. Well, wait till they take over the presidency and pack the Supreme Court with a bunch of justices like Ketanji Brown Jackson. All of a sudden, any rules and scruples that we have about property rights will go out the window. And within about 5 or 6 years, trust me on this, it's not going to take very long, we're going to start confiscating properties. You don't need your house. You don't need that. You don't need to live in a 3,500 square foot house. Or you don't have any kids living with you anymore. You own it free and clear. You can move into an apartment. Here's a nice apartment. We're going to move you out of your house and put you in a nice apartment. And, I started telling this to my friend today at lunch. He goes, okay, now you've lost me, Sam. Now you've lost me. You just a bridge too far. And I'm thinking to myself, says the guy that's comfortably lived in America his entire life. You don't know how the rest of the world works. You've read it in books. You've subscribed to the New York Times your whole life. You think you understand how it all went down. But I'm convinced that most people who are not alarmed by this have no fundamental understanding of how communism developed. You think my parents' country was some backwards, silly, country that had terrible? I mean, no. Look it up historically. Czechoslovakia, at the time World War II broke out, had a higher standard of living than Germany. It was as first world as you get. For Germany, taking Czechoslovakia over, invading in 1938, that was an enormous boon economically. Taking over those factories for the war effort, huge. And I guess my point is, right, if it happened there, it can happen here. They had a constitution. They had strong democratic principles. They were good and decent people. They got caught up in socialism. It took over, and it happened internally. So these are, warning signs. Now, speaking of a creep of foreign adversaries and bad things, Trump in Europe, I'll talk about that next. Great stuff, folks. Stay tuned. Welcome to the What's Right Show, your place for common sense conservatism, Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. here on News Talk 840 KXNT, at What's Right Sam on X, formerly known as Twitter, and of course my email. Do email me if you can, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, sam@whatsrightshow.com. All righty. Trump went to the Netherlands. The Netherlands is also known as Holland, and the people there are the Dutch. I hope I've thoroughly confused you now. Anyway, the Netherlands, small country, Western Europe on the ocean there, and there was a meeting of NATO. The former Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, is now the NATO Attorney General, Secretary General, excuse me, and he caused quite a stir when he was recounting Trump's stern words to Israel and Iran. We covered this yesterday on the program. Trump said basically that, Iran and Israel have been fighting for so long, they don't know what the F they are doing. Well, I'm just saying I played the clip yesterday. I'm not going to play it again. So here is Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, okay, recounting the story in a jovial way, and it, raised a few eyebrows.
Big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. They fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while, you have to use a certain word.
So Trump saying it, then Rutte comes in and says, and then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language. Well, this morning, a reporter asks Trump about this. Oh, God, this is exactly what we hate about the media. They just have to take everything. And Trump didn't call himself Daddy, to be clear. He was saying he was giving a stern talking to Iran and to Israel. By the way, Iran's not in NATO, right? We all agree on this. And this reporter turns it around and says, well, Trump, it makes it, Mr. President, you sounds like you just think of NATO countries as your kids. Listen.
Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you Daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard.
By the way, Marco Rubio behind Trump is dying. He's laughing. Marco Rubio is asphyxiating behind Trump. Trump is like, what the hell is this question? And how did we go from talking about Israel and Iran to talking about NATO allies that we're having a great conference with?
I'm hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Do you regard your NATO allies, though, as kind of like children, and they're obviously listening to you, and they're spending more, and you're obviously appreciative of that. But do you hope that actually they're going to be able to defend themselves, defend Europe on their own?
I think they need help a little bit at the beginning, and I think they'll be able to, and I think they're going to remember this day. And this was a big day for NATO. You know, this was a very big day. They took it. One of the gentlemen said, you know what? We've been trying to raise money raise the rate for 30 years, he said, 20 years, from almost the beginning. And he's been there for a long time. He said, until you came along, it never happened. What you did is amazing. It's been sort of an amazing day for a lot of reasons, but also for that. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think they can do it without you, though, in the future? Can they do it without
ask Mark.
States?
I mean, you have to ask Mark.
Yeah, I mean, such a hostile question. Now, the NATO summit was phenomenally successful, and a large part because we were able to convince our allies to spend more, not just 2%, but in some cases 5% of their GDP toward their military budgets. This is huge news, okay? And so by this, you know, and even CNBC talking about this, from 2% to 5%. And by the way, they've agreed to, by 2035 to show a credible incremental path to reach this goal. So they're not just going to be left for the next 10 years to not do anything. They have to demonstrate that they are incrementally moving up to that 5% spend. Now let's talk about the backdrop here, because Trump deserves some credit here. We've had a phenomenal 2 weeks. We started with Israel attacking Tehran, the Iranians. Went in, strategic strikes, took out their air defenses, basically within a few days acquired almost complete air superiority over the Islamic Republic of Iran. Then, together with the U.S., went in and sabotaged key nuclear sites. One of the big pieces of news today, of course, is that the intelligence is starting to look more likely than not that the 3 sites were severely damaged to the point where it would take years to rebuild. That's something CNN was not admitting to as recently as yesterday. But regardless, Trump comes in, quickly bombs, and then within 48 hours, we have a ceasefire, which seems to, as of today, Wednesday, be holding. In both Europe and the Middle East, Trump is leaning hard on our allies to take primary responsibility for the security and stability of their own countries and of their own regions. Now we can help, right, and be a backstop, but we're not front and center. And all these flippin' idiots, and I'm sorry, it pains me to say this, but Tucker Carlson just acting like hysterical women going, oh, America first, and Trump is a warmonger and a disappointment and this, that, and the other, and Steve Bannon. Oh, God, I've warned you about Steve Bannon for a while. I know some of you like him very, very much. I think the man is trouble. So at any rate, right? Look at this. We have an alliance now of Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, depending on how you want to pronounce it, Egypt, maybe even now Syria and Lebanon. This is enormous. We can stabilize the Middle East. And at the same exact time, what do we have? We have NATO countries saying, yeah, we're gonna over the next 10 years, we're gonna more than double our contribution to defense. This is how you reduce the intervention, okay? This is what Tucker says that he wants. This is how you do it without leaving a power vacuum. We are still front and center. We are still the king of Kong around the world. We're just doing it by spending less money. It doesn't mean that we just walk away and ignore it and let them deal with it on their own. There's something else I noticed. I don't know if you picked up on it much, Robbie, but at the summit today, this morning, So kind of before we woke up our time, Trump was asked a couple of times about Russia. And he said some important things. Now, again, I tend to pay less attention to what Trump says and more to what he does. One woman asked him about providing missile defenses. And she brought up Israel, and Trump said, yes, we give missile defenses to Israel. We could consider something like that for Ukraine. Because this was a Ukrainian woman whose husband was apparently fighting in the war. Trump actually got a little bit emotional. He also had a long meeting with Zelensky, which Trump said went well. Trump used very different language toward Zelensky and toward the Ukrainians today in the last 24 hours than he ever has historically. Somebody asked him, what do you think of Putin? Can you make a deal with Putin? And Trump said, I can make a deal. Putin wants to make a deal. This much I know. However, I'm not quite sure what to think of him. A reporter presses Trump on whether or not Putin is, in fact, an enemy. Sort of a softball question, but still trying to get at sort of the idea of what is Trump thinking in his head. And Trump's answer was, I think he said maybe. He didn't definitively say yes, but he also certainly definitively did not say no. So what is this? Trump wants a deal on Ukraine. Trump wants peace in that war. I know that. He's not going to get it. He apparently, he comes in and he's got 4 years, 3 years, whatever, of Biden, being all in on Ukraine. Now, what did I tell you? If you're mediating a conflict with two people going at each other, and I know this as an attorney, I go to mediations. This is what we do. Sometimes before a trial, if you're a client, you want to get your case resolved. You don't want to go and have to sit there for a week and talk to a jury. Totally the best thing to do is to sit down for a mediation. One side comes in, we come in, the defense comes in, the insurance company, sit down in different rooms, and a mediator, a former judge, goes back and forth between the rooms. Now, the mediator, the judge, doesn't have any credibility if he's best buddies with me, for example. The defense, the insurance company, they're not going to listen to that guy. They're not going to listen to anything he says. You're just in the pockets of Sam and Ash. And literally, I've had that happen where a judge, I'm a friendly guy. People know me in town, and the mediator is friendly with me. Like, you know what, we're not interested in this. So Trump had to come in and even it out after 3 years of the Americans being firmly behind Zelensky. Trump comes in and goes, you know what, Ukraine, let's make a deal, and tried to make overtures to Putin. Clearly that hasn't worked. So now he's going to start putting pressure on Putin. And by the way, Putin is watching what Trump is doing. He's like, Trump in the Middle East, mark my words. Putin now sees that Trump, who ran on a peace platform, is willing, when necessary, to drop a few mother of all bombs on someone who he perceives to be his enemy. He is willing to do that to save life and to protect Western civilization. If Trump gets pushed by Putin too much, Putin risks Trump one day saying, we're going to give this 2 weeks, whatever, 2 weeks. And then Trump waking up one morning going, you know what, bombs away. Now, it's not like that. Trump wants to make it seem like that. But behind the scenes, of course, Trump gave one deadline. Then Israel struck. He gave another deadline. The Iranians told him to go pound sand, so he comes in with the B-2 bombers. The rest, as they say, is history. But we have all of these things happening. And I have to reiterate for the record, because it needs to be said, how grateful we ought to be, you and I, all of us, every day, that Kamala Harris did not win this election last November. Would have been absolutely horrible. Can you imagine? Only Trump can do this, right? He's able to talk to people and get them to cower. And that saves lives, by the way. Talking frankly and forcefully to people, believe it or not, is a hell of a lot safer than shooting missiles and dropping bombs or sending soldiers. But weak men start endless wars because they are unable to confront forcefully and with authority their enemies. And all this idea of Trump just being, well, Putin, that's not the case. And I've said this now endlessly, so I'm seeing some vindication. But we'll see. Time will tell. But this was another very successful trip. You're not going to hear a lot about it in the media, of course, because they don't like to accentuate Trump's victories. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam & Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right. Well, I just don't have to tell you this, but Mark certainly is not a fan of Steve Bannon. So in his show, you can hear a lot more about what he has to say about Bannon. But at any rate, I'll continue here. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Marco Rubio got a little feisty today at the Netherlands at the NATO summit. Very upset about the crappy reporting. This is with Dasha Burns at the NATO summit. And this is a little sit down that they had afterwards, a one-on-one with Rubio. Listen to this.
The goal the president set out was 3 nuclear sites. He targeted them. He says, I want a one-off campaign in which we go in, wipe out 3 nuclear sites, hit them hard, and get out without any loss of life. And the mission was achieved, and without any escalation. And the mission was achieved. The truth of the matter is that happened on Saturday night. By Monday night, we had a ceasefire, so 48 hours later. So not only did this bold move by the president, and he deserves a tremendous amount of credit for taking this bold move, not only did this bold move have impact, but I actually think it helped end the conflict. That it allowed Israel to say, okay, now the objectives that we wanted to see out of this operation have been achieved. And I think the president deserves a lot of credit. He had a defined mission. So this is what we're going to do. We're hitting 3 targets. We're not hitting regime people. We're not trying to overthrow the government. We're not looking to invade. We're going to hit. Our problem with Iran is with the nuclear program. We're going to hit the 3 sites that we've been negotiating over, and then we're going to move off the mark. And that's what we do.
Yeah, there it is. Now, setting aside the questions of efficacy, all right, very clear. Now, then Rubio got into all these leaks, right? These leaks that CNN has been using to cast doubt on whether or not these sites actually got hit hard enough to stop the program.
It's obviously quite early. The president is vehemently denying the veracity of these reports. But can you give us, now that we've had a little bit of distance, the latest battle damage assessment?
Well, I can't talk to you about intelligence. I can also tell you that intelligence leaks are one of the most frustrating things anywhere, not just because you got somebody who has access to this putting stuff out there, but because it's so often mischaracterized. An intelligence report, for anyone who's ever seen it, sometimes is an assessment. Some analyst will make an assessment. Or analysts will make an assessment. And in these leaks, what you typically have is someone who read it and then leaks it to the media, giving it the spin and the angle they want it to have because they've got some purpose. Embarrass the administration, they were against the action, whatever it may be.
Okay. And I think the embarrassing thing is how CNN jumped on this and took a low-level source and a relatively flimsy source and spun it into a whole headline about how these strikes did not do anything to stop the program. Here is Aaron Burnett, who from the 19th to the 24th, in 5 days, changed her entire spiel or spin on the Iranian nuclear program. Watch this.
This timeline of Iran being a few weeks away from a nuclear bomb is in direct contradiction to CNN's reporting. According to U.S. intelligence assessments, Iran is 3 years away from being able to produce a nuclear weapon if they wanted to. So the facts on Iran getting a nuclear weapon do not bear out the claim at the heart of what has put the world on the verge of world war.
Okay, now that was all on the 19th. And here is her on the 24th, 5 days later.
The Iranian nuclear program by months. We got to call it like it is. It's a big deal.
So on the 19th, whoa, what do you mean a few weeks away from the bomb? It's a direct contradiction to our reporting. Iran is 3 years away from the bomb. And then once Trump went in and did what he did, CNN turns around and says, well, this only set the program back by months. You know, this is it. Absolutely astonishing. By the way, this is the same host that yesterday on Inside Politics, Aaron Burnett, said this about Iranian chants death to America. They're just friendly.
But the question is whether or not the calm can remain when the regime that is still there, who wants death to America, death to Israel, stays in place. And that is part of the discussion, right?
Yes, absolutely part of the discussion. And, you know, I remember, Dan, at one point being in Tehran years ago, and they're chanting death to America all around me, even as I say, oh, I'm an American reporting for CNN, and they were happy to speak to me. So that those two is sort of jarring realities of the chant, and yet the friendliness have existed together.
What? Oh, it's a friendly chant, death to America, but it's just cool. This is the problem with the American political left. The sheer denialism of and refusal to see reality is ultimately going to be these people's demise. You have some wealthy people in New York going, yeah, we're going to vote for a socialist. Well, he doesn't mean, when he says from the river to the sea, it's a friendly chant. It's a friendly thing. Remember Zohran? Momdani? Yesterday, I played the clip of him saying, well, what's the from the river to the sea? What is that really? No, it's just, it means equality. And people are buying that. There are Jews in New York that are like, oh, yeah, it's just a friendly thing. Aaron Burnett, oh, death to America. They love us. They love us. I wouldn't trust these people running a popcorn stand, let alone anything of any importance in this country. To the extent that anybody listens to what CNN has to say or talks to them, I just don't. It's my recommendation. All right, folks, I'll see you tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place.